Eventually, I think the industrial food system is going to collapse, and we're going to come to a real reckoning in our society where everybody's going to need to figure out where their food is coming from. And our hope is that we've laid some of the foundation for that.
Nice to see you, Tim.
Yeah, good to
Thanks
see
for
you.
doing
Yeah,
this.
sure.
What time is it, Madeleine?
Good to meet you.
It's 1:15, so you're good.
Yeah,
cool.
I gotta
go too.
Thanks, Aaron.
And more connected, more susceptible.
Okay, more susceptible.
I was kind of looking for something that had a little bit more growth, opportunities, and excitement, and
So I started picking up trash. Banana. And I think that it's like harmful, like, sorry, Tim likes bananas.
the way you said banana.
What does it take to grow a mission-driven business in Philly and keep it thriving while serving your community? I'm Becca Smith, here with Madeleine Schneider, and today we're talking with two founders of Philly startups trying to make the city greener, more sustainable, and more connected. Today on Currently, we're joined by two Temple alums who've built businesses that blend purpose with impact. Dylan Baird is the founder of Philly Foodworks, connecting local farmers and eaters through a modern food hub. And Tim Bennett is the founder of Bennett Compost, helping thousands of Philadelphians turn waste into healthy soil. Together, we'll talk about balancing mission with growth, the challenges of running a small business in Philly, and what it means to build organizations that put community at the center.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to have you. Dylan, I'd love to hear a little bit more about Philly Foodworks and how you got started and what your goals are.
So Philly Foodworks is outer facing. We're an online farmers market. So people come to us, they shop our web store, you can sign up for a subscription, and then we'll bring it right to your house. But on the back end, what we're doing is we're building the supply chain for local food. So that looks like supporting some farmers with technical assistance, doing crop planning, getting farmer availability each week, bringing those products in, figuring out the trucking and the acquisition of all of that product, then running the pick pack at our warehouse and the delivery to the customer. More than just produce, we carry full line of bakery, dairy, meat, seafood, all different kinds of local stuff. We exist in a space, we're kind of on the fringe of a system, so there's not a lot of people right now who are eating local food. And I've seen other people who are in this space kind of try to make that dive to grow really rapidly. And I think that as we saw in the pandemic, we saw our business grow a lot. And I think that we're figuring out our systems, we're kind of biding our time. Eventually, I think the industrial food system is going to collapse, and we're going to come to a real reckoning in our society where everybody's going to need to figure out where their food is coming from. And our hope is that we've laid some of the foundation for that at Philly Foodworks. Foodworks is actually the same way we have a waterworks, a gasworks. We're trying to build the foodworks for this city. So think about food as a public utility.
That's amazing. And Tim, could you share a little bit about Bennett Compost?
Bennett Compost was started with the idea of trying to make composting easy for people in Philadelphia. And so today we provide curbside composting to around 6,500 households in every zip code throughout the city. We also do pickups from around 140 commercial establishments, everything from neighborhood coffee shops to restaurants, hotels, institutions like the University of Pennsylvania. And then we take all of that food waste and we make it into compost that we then use and sell to people to grow more food, to grow flowers, and to be blended into soil mixes for growing as well.
And where do you see Bennett Compost going in the next 5 years?
We've seen a lot of momentum kind of in terms of people's understanding of food waste and waste in general, right? I mean, I think we saw a lot of that during the pandemic when all of a sudden more people were home and they were cooking and all of a sudden they had all this food they realized and they're like, wow. And then we saw more recently here in Philadelphia, sanitation workers were on strike and we saw it pilot up again. And we saw again, people starting to realize and think more about what happens to their food when they throw it away. It doesn't disappear like magic on the curb. And we see us kind of continuing to grow both in terms of serving our customers and also in terms of processing that material as locally as possible and making high quality soil for people to grow more food.
So to an outsider, Philly might not seem like the greatest place to run a green business. So I'm curious what your perception is of running a green and a sustainable business in Philly. Is there some resonance to that, or do you think that Philadelphia stands up as a place for a successful green business to thrive?
At least from the waste perspective, you look at places like Seattle, San Francisco, even at this point New York City, Boston, DC, and they are kind of further along in terms of how they're the city itself is handling its waste. So I can kind of understand why that question
and it's
might be
interesting
there.
because for compost, in those other cities, they have citywide composting systems. I don't know if all the cities you mentioned do, but I know that and that's a question of is Philly going to put together a citywide composting system? Well, the fact that the city is either not prioritizing or unable to, whatever, means that it's a great place to start a composting business.
I would say to that question that I think there are pluses and minuses to kind of running a sustainably or green business here in Philly. I mean, I think there's a great community of actual people and residents who are interested in this and who care about this kind of deeply and passionately. There also are people who it's just, for various reasons, it's not on their radar yet, right? So it may not be as widespread as it is in some other cities yet, or it may just not be that those people are connected to the ways and the resources to do it. I think there's just a general perception that Philly is a hard place to run a business, period, without taking the green part out of it. I've only run a business in Philly, so I don't really have a comparison point to say it's a lot easier than this. I will say that, while there have been challenges in running the business in Philly, I've also heard stories from places where, at least, again, and I speaking of my experience as a composting business, where the city government or the municipality was actively hostile. And I would say that that's never been the case here in Philadelphia. They've always been, for the most part, kind of supportive of what we're doing, at least from a keep doing what you're doing perspective. Now, whether they've, prioritized it, whether they've invested money or resources in that, different answers to that question depending on the thing, but they've never been actively hostile to what we've done. And for compared to some other people, I think that's a positive. And I think that there are people who are supporting and promoting the work that's happening, whether that gets to a citywide municipal level, right, to be seen. But I think there is kind of some more stuff going on despite the bureaucratic challenges of sometimes running any kind of business here in Philadelphia.
So obviously both of your businesses have been around for over a decade. How have they grown and changed since you began them? Have you found that your mission has changed or that customers have changed and that their expectations and desires have shifted? Curious, have you seen that growth realized?
For us, our mission has kind of stayed consistent and it really has been a driving point for us. And that mission is to make composting kind of simple for people in Philadelphia, right? And so that has kind of been our guiding star throughout the entire 16 years that we've been doing it. Now, that being said, how we go about doing that has evolved, right? We started off as just doing kind of home composting, doing residential, and we've grown into doing more of the soil manufacturing. We've grown into doing more commercial work, right? So it's expanded, but it's all expanded around that same kind of mission. I mean, from a perspective of the business, it's changed kind of in ways I never even dreamed of when I started, right? I started it, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't think it was going to work. I was so confident in it that I took only $100 and put it in a bank account because I was like, if I lose $100, that's okay, right? I've spent $100 on much less worthwhile things in my life. And so, now the fact that we have 30 employees and that I'm not doing all of the stuff and it's grown and we're serving all these households all throughout the city. When I take a moment to reflect, for me, it's kind of, the scale of it is kind of mind-blowing, but the mission of it has still stayed kind of true from the beginning.
I think for us, something that's interesting is we started in 2014 and it was the beginning of e-commerce. No one was really buying food online that much. And so when we started out, we were trying to be a flexible CSA. And so if you're not familiar with a CSA, you basically would sign up at the beginning of a season and you'd commit to getting a box of vegetables that you had no say over. Would just come from a farm, whatever the farmer had, it would come in a box, you got it every week. You had to pay for it no matter what. If you were out of town, you still had to pay for it. And there are a lot of great benefits to that to local farmers, but it wasn't really that the idea, the ethos behind it is the community is supporting the agriculture. So the community is sharing the risk of the agriculture, but it's just not that practical for the average person. And so for us, it was a big deal that you could skip a box. You could pay as you go. You didn't have to pay all up at front. And it was all online based. And then since 2014, e-commerce has just come, especially after COVID, in a way that we couldn't really imagine where, we're now, thinking about talking to someone in 2014 that you can on your phone click two things and have something to your door in 2 hours. Would have been crazy. And so it's been interesting feeling the need, it's been necessary in order to continue the impact and continue our mission of trying to build a local food system, of keep up with that, while at the same time, we operate with a completely different logistics. We can't just order new inventory that, at midnight that shows up at 6 a.m. We're crop planting with farmers at the beginning of the year. We're still doing a lot of those things that are part of that are about building a local food system, but we have to, at some level, we have to keep up with like a strong, our user experience on our platform, and how are we making sure that we're like marketing all of our products the right way, and these things that are, the space has just gotten like so competitive, and consumer demands, it's like your website takes 3 seconds to load and people are like, oh, I don't have time for this,
I think Dylan kind of brings up a good point, and like a big change in less about our businesses and more about societal expectations, right? And I was talking about this with somebody the other day, where like it used to be that if you called a business and they at 6 p.m. and they called you back the next morning at 9:30, you're like, thanks for getting back to me right away, right? And now it's like you send an email at 6 a.m. and you don't respond till 9:30, 10 a.m. and someone's like, well, why did it take so long for me to get a response? And so I think there are these kind of changing consumer demands. But I think that's, at least for us, that's what's been kind of so great, again, to kind of champion the Philadelphia green community, right? About working with the people that we're working with. I think there is a understanding of who we are and what we do as a local small business, and as people who are kind of looking to kind of work in the space. And so there is an understanding that like we're not Amazon, right? We don't have 24-hour employees, but what we do have is that when we do get back to you, and we still get back to people quickly, like there's a human touch that comes with that. And that I think really what we see is that really goes a long way. So what we lack in kind of that instant kind of reaction, we make up for with that human touch. And that really does make our customers like really appreciative and loyal and really kind of stick around for the long term, I think.
So for consumer-driven businesses, sometimes there's a tension between living out the business's mission for social impact, for social change, and maintaining commercial financial viability. So I'm curious to hear in your businesses how you work through that tension, how you think about the decisions that you make, if there's any trade-offs that you think about making to ensure that your businesses are thriving and they continue moving on so that they can continue to make the social impact that they have.
I'm going to take a step back from just the Philly Foodworks experience. And if we think about like the larger market in general, and we think about the goal of the firm in this world is to create a profit. And we know that the basis of profit is at some level extracting value from somebody. You're selling something for more than you paid for it, or you're selling something and people are working and doing something to it, and then you're able to sell it to someone else. And if you paid the people who are working on it, the full price of the value they created, you wouldn't make a profit. Then we think about our impact businesses, where we're trying to have a positive impact. We're trying to add value. We're trying to add value to farmers. We're trying to create good paying, secure jobs for our employees. We're trying to create a positive experience for our consumers and create healthy food at trying to be as affordable as possible. And like that kind of is in contradiction to the laws of the existing market. And so for us at Philly Foodworks, it's been a huge struggle, and it's something that we probably spent too much time honestly talking about. When we first started Philly Foodworks, it was very, very, very mission driven. Like just sort of, we don't sell anything that's not local. This is all about local food. We sell local food. And so when the winter would come around, we would just shut down and then we would be off. And then the next year we stayed open for the winter, and we were selling some spinach and some potatoes, and we lost a lot of customers, and our sales weren't very good. And the farmer, I'm talking to an Amish guy, and he's like, hey, Dylan, why aren't we selling, you told me to grow the spinach, why aren't we selling the spinach? And I'm like, well, we don't really have a lot of stuff to sell. And, people, they are looking for other fruit, they're looking for other vegetables. They don't just want spinach and potatoes. And the Amish guy is kind of like, so Dylan, you mean to tell me if you sold, citrus and tomatoes out of season, I would sell more spinach and potatoes? And I was like, oh, I guess Ruben, yeah, you're right, we would. He's like, well, come on, man, you're living too close to your ideals here. And so that was kind of the first compromise we made, was we need to start bringing in non-local produce. And when we realized that we either need to bring in non-local produce or we're going to go out of business, that decision became very clear. And so I think that for any entity, for any person, even just in our own regular lives as consumers, we have certain ideals, we want to live certain values, but we might not always be able to afford the higher price option that is better for our health and better for the environment. Or maybe we'd rely on convenience. And so we're constantly in this place where we exist in this contradiction, and we're having to make decisions. And I think one thing that has become really true for me is, one, transparency and honesty is really important. And I think that that's where that is like a big difference than what we see kind of like the greenwashing, or we're working on some branding stuff now. And it's like, you look at other websites and every single other business that sells food talks about local and fresh. And it's like, so the transparency I think is really important, and is a way to resist the sort of like normal trend, which is I'm going to do everything on the back end to make profit and then tell the consumer everything that they want to hear. And so being transparent in its way is like revolutionary. And then the other thing is just remembering and coming back to people are the most important part. And so I think that needs to be sort of a North Star in your decision-making framework, because once you start making decisions that aren't valuing people and are extracting and hurting people, like that is like, now you're not just walking this fine line of the contradiction, you're like creating harm.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we have kind of this mission to make composting simple, right? And that's what drives us. And then we kind of focus on trying to do our best every single day to be the best, to treat our employees as well as we can, to treat our customers as well as we can, to do things in the most sustainable way that we can. But we don't let kind of the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think that, so we've grown into a lot of the things that we're doing, right? Like now we offer, health insurance for all of our employees. We couldn't do that at the beginning. It wasn't financially sustainable, for the business to do that. But we kind of approach it as like, when we have the opportunity to do better, we do better, right? And I think that's kind of the general ethos that we try to take into every decision. It's like, what's the best we can do today, and how can we be better tomorrow, and how can we be better in a year, right? And rather than getting so hung up on being perfect today, we just kind of continue to work to be a better company and to do whatever we think the right thing is. And that has kind of benefited us from a long-term sustainability perspective. We're kind of looking at it not just like the immediacy of those decisions, but also like, how do we grow into those decisions? And that's, I think, worked out well for us, and allows us to now say we do X, Y, and Z and all these kind of like cool things, but like that took 16 years for us to get here. It did not happen overnight.
I'm curious, Tim, like the decision to do health insurance for employees, was that a business decision, a quote unquote business decision, was about employee retention or something like that? Or was that because like, that's like how we should treat people in this world?
I guess, I don't see those as like a different, that's a false choice to me. Like it's how we should treat people, and it's also how we retain better employees, right? So we want to be able to retain more employees. We need to treat people well. So that when we have the opportunity to do that, we do. I mean, I think for us also, like, when we made that decision, we took a very hard look at like what it would cost, and we decided that we had to raise our prices. And that was the first time we had raised the price. I mean, our standard pricing is a subscription service. We raised our prices when we did that, and we wrote a back to your point about honesty and transparency, a very like open, honest letter to all of our customers about why we were doing this, explaining that like a big part of this increase was going to go to who provided this. And, we always try to keep our prices as affordable as possible, because that's part of making it easy, right? But also like, I know that early on when I started the business, like I was living very close to the margin. So I understand, I try not to take other people's like even $2 or $3 increase like for granted. So I was very nervous about sending this email, right? Like a lot of thought, a lot of nerve, like I'm gonna send this email and everyone's gonna cancel. Or not everyone, but like a large, 10, 20, 30% of our customers are just gonna like immediately cancel. And we did it, and we sent it, and we got more emails that day from people talking about how much they cared about our service and how much they valued our service than any other day. Because a lot of times when you're on email, you're dealing with the complaints that people have, right?
Yeah.
They're like, you didn't pick up my compost, like this, all the you make mistakes, all the things that happen. That's a lot of the emails you get. Most people aren't emailing you and being like, thanks for doing what you said you would do. I appreciate it. It makes my life better, right? But that day they did. And I still have like a folder of, 30 or 40 emails like in my inbox, and like when I'm having a really awful day or like things are just not going right, I'll take 5 minutes and I'll just look at, like I'll just read something and be like, okay, most people do like what we're doing. We're not failing at everything all the time. And so it helps to center that. But I think that point is that like, especially in the kind of consumers that we're working with, like they appreciate that we're able to do that. And they're willing to, some of them, to like pay a little bit extra to help support that mission, right? And so I think that's kind of how we have approached balancing those kind of things and making those decisions and trying to, again, be a little bit better all the time and figure out how to do it.
Well, and you had a similar experience when egg prices raised, right? You got a lot of positive responses to that email as well.
Yeah, we had to increase our egg price like 50 cents a dozen or something. And it was like this big deal and it felt like a huge thing. And it was the same thing. It was like never have we had more positive people being like, play the farmer, and we explained it. We talked about like why these prices are increasing, what's going to happen, like how this is going to help cover the rising cost of packaging, how this is going to help go into like, better facilities for the chickens, and people were really receptive to it.
Yeah, I think both of you had set that precedent for transparency about your business practices. And I feel like you said, Philly is always receptive to honesty and transparency. And it's
and that notion of being in it together.
Yes.
Right.
So sure, the people are getting health insurance. Sure, we need to pay the farmers more. I think there's like a support for those kinds of decisions when we're all kind of working together.
So we already spoke a little bit about the tension between your values and how that plays into how you scale and grow your businesses. But another place where we see some of that tension is in your marketing and your messaging. So how do you balance communicating the more tangible and obvious benefits? So in the case of Philly Foodworks, fresher, better food, or the more immediate results of composting with some of the more value-oriented messaging and systemic change messaging that you want to communicate to your consumers?
What I do know, I know that in this world, people's attention is very short. And so people are not spending a lot of time with you and on your site or learning about your thing. And so it's really important. So I'm trying to lean heavier into talking about how the thing actually works and what you actually get. I think also then there's like, talking about what you actually get, you're like in this world where, well, where's mine? What's in it for me? What do I get? And so it's like the irony of like, you came to my site because you're interested in supporting local, the local food system and local producers, but the first thing that you're gonna think is, well, what do I get? And I'm like, it's like the same thing for me. Like I'm doing the same thing when I'm, going to whatever, making some of my purchasing decisions. I think that's like, we all exist in this framework that we're operating from. And then again, like in the beginning of the thing, we were talking about where is Philly Foodworks going, at the end of the day, like I believe we need a local food system and that the industrial food system will collapse at some point and people are gonna not have a way to get food. And so we're building that now. And so how do you get someone to make an action every day that's like a threat that exists 50 years from now? I think that one thing that I've realized is that like people aren't stupid. And so ultimately like people can pick up really quick. Like they came to your website for a reason and like really quickly they're gonna understand if this business is like actually that local business that they wanna support and doing the things that they care about, or if it's something that feels like a greenwashing experience. And ultimately you need to lean into the like, how does it work and what do you get? Because that's the information that people actually need to make a decision, and that like, that other stuff, like if you're doing it the right way and you're an honest and transparent and person business with integrity, that people will be able to get that within like 30 seconds exposure to your brand.
I think it's a similar experience. I mean, we talk almost exclusively like on our website and in our marketing about how our services work and like kind of the very tangible benefits. And part of that is driven through my own experiences, right? I like to think that we have done a lot early on. We did a lot of like event-based marketing. So I would be at farmers markets first, like just kind of like guerrilla style with a sign hanging around my neck and talking to people. And then later on like an actual like table and like talking to people. And I like to think I am a good salesperson and I can be convincing. And I have never, ever, ever once in the thousands of conversations with people I've had taken someone who had no idea about composting or why they should be doing it all the way to signing them up for the service in one conversation, right? So when you're coming to our website, when we're engaging with you, all of our kind of marketing and sales material is talking about how you want to compost, you're not sure how to do it, we make it easy for you, right? And so that's kind of where that effort is. That doesn't mean that we don't do a ton of like presentations and talking to community groups and schools, and that's where we talk about composting as like the bigger picture, like why you should be doing it. But that's not like the focus of our sales and marketing effort, because there's a journey that the consumer has to go on, right? I know this is like a little bit of a marketing, this is geared towards kind of marketing professionals. For us, like there's a journey that person has to go on, and they're not going to go on that journey in one step. So we're going to focus our efforts on the people who are ready to start to do this. How do we give them tools to do that, whether it's us or some other way, right? But getting them to think that they should do that, that's a whole different thing, and we will do that where it makes sense, but we have limited resources, and there's a lot of other people who are also doing that work out there. So we direct them to resources, we partner, we'll talk about that in events, but like the focus is for us on now, okay, you're ready. Let's take an action. Here's how you do it.
It's interesting thinking about that journey, because there's the journey, the customer journey for them to get to know you, become a customer, but you're also both working on trying to take them on a journey towards maybe a mindset shift around how they're engaging with the environment and the world around them. So when you think about, there's the marketing messaging that you've got, we've talked about that. How do you get someone on board to being a customer? Have you given any thought to, and how do you bring that person also along on the notion of the food system maybe changing, or the ways that we can impact the environment in positive ways may seem insurmountable, but it does make a difference. So how do you bring them into that story also?
I think that it starts with the person's experience. So I have a friend who does Bennett Compost, and they were telling me this story about they were at a friend's house prepping food for a meal. They're like cooking a big meal, and they're at their friend's house, and their friend didn't have a compost bucket. And they're like, ended up putting their like the lemon peels and things like that in a Tupperware so they could take it home and compost it, because they're like, and like, you know, we have our own little compost set up at home, and it's like, it becomes kind of addicting, you know, like it's the kind of thing where like the experience, you can kind of lead with the experience. And like, so for us with the food, it's like, you know, it's a different way of buying your food. It's not instantaneous. We don't have every single thing you want. We don't have every single thing all the time in season. You know, like you're eating with the season. You're eating, you know, it might look a little different than the perfect produce, quote unquote, perfect produce you're seeing at the grocery store. But if you can get over those hurdles and you start getting some orders, like you start to become invested, you know?
So it's positive social, like peer pressure. We talk about peer pressure. We think about it a lot of like in a bad way. It's peer pressure towards positive action.
And it's just like, oh, like I'm used to eggs like looking and tasting a certain way. And like, I mean, it's like, you know, my friends will like make fun of me, and it's just kind of like, where do these chickens come from? Like, you know how that, did they do that? Did they pump them? Did they plump them with a saline solution? Like, I don't want those chickens. Like, you know, like, because that's like, when you start eating Philly Foodworks food, you're just like, oh, chicken that I've been eating my entire life tastes different than chicken that's raised on pasture. And why does it taste different? Why does it look different? Why is the chicken that I'm so used to eating plump? Oh, it's because they inject it, because 30% of it's salt water, and they inject it with salt water after it's been processed. Like, and so people start that experience. They that's like, it's like the gateway investment. And then they start going, but then you start doing, like, we do a lot of stories. Like, we have to question one of our customer service, what do you want to know more of? And everybody wants to know more about producer stories. So where did the food come from? And like, that's like something that I think is really compelling. So we do like farmer interviews, and we try to incorporate videos, and we're trying to do a lot more of that, because you can get so bogged down in the business that you forget that, like, right, we need to make sure that we're telling this story.
And the great thing about it, I mean, what the challenging thing about this kind of journey that people have to go on is it's hard and it's long, and behavior change is hard. But the flip side of that is behavior change is hard. So once you go on that journey and you start doing that, you start eating that local chicken, you start composting your food scraps, then when you don't do it, you're like, why does this chicken or this tomato taste like this? Where is the place where I put my food scraps? They don't go in this is the trash. Like, where is the thing? And so it takes a little more work on the front end, but I think it builds so it's a slower burn, right? But it builds a more sustainable customer base. It builds a more kind of long-term customer base. And, you know, I don't have the kind of like intellectual framework that Dylan has to talk about some of these issues, right? But like, it does, the kind of like slower build does lead to a little bit of a more long-term success, and is a little bit the antithesis of what you kind of see traditionally, the idea of like what should happen. So it works in your favor.
Which then I think it kind of goes back to like I mean, I know Tim said, like, basically it's like, well, it's like once you sign up for Bennett Compost, like, you're like, once people sign up and they complete their you know, month trial, and if they've decided that they do their free month, and then they're going to stick up, you know, continue on with Bennett Compost, like, it's like they don't leave, you know, like either they move, like that's the reason that they leave, you know. And for Philly Foodworks, we see it like, once we get you past 5 orders, our customer attrition rate is very, very low. And so to the question about marketing and what it's like marketing in this environment, I think it's like a weird thing, because everything in the marketing space is like, it's this constant grab for attention. It's offer, what's the offer you're giving me? And you're like competing in this space where you're just trying to get people to try your thing. And then, you know, and so then how do you balance that?
I can attest to the, when we've talked about this before, to the shift that happens when you start eating really fresh vegetables and food. So I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and we get our Philly Foodworks box, and it has kohlrabi and turnips and beets and all these things that traditionally you might not think a kid would love to eat. But we find recipes, we make them all together, and more than once my son has said, Mom, I love these Philly Foodworks meals. And I really do think it's because the flavor in the vegetables is, the meals are flavorful, the vegetables are high quality. So it's a testament to getting like kids to eat turnips and beets, like that. They're so fresh.
I was like, I mean, we sell chickpeas at Philly Foodworks. We don't sell local chickpeas, but we sell chickpeas. But like, I was trying to get my son to eat chickpeas last night, and I was like, Larry, let me show you a video of how these chickpeas are, And so we watched like some 10-minute video on YouTube of a farmer like and picking the chickpeas and drying the chickpeas and husking the chickpeas, and like suddenly he's like eating it. He like ate all his chickpeas. And it's like there's something to that where like. And I mean, I like to think the quality of our food is a lot better, but I think there's also just something about like, it's weird. It's like this box of vegetables shows up and it's like kind of dirty and it like, dirty in a good way. And it's like, it's a different experience than most kids are used to having with like vegetables that's very like sterile, whatever. And like that in itself is enough for kids to like try it and be interested in it and then it tastes better.
They get a sense of where it comes from when the beets come with all the
leaves.
The greens on the top. Yeah.
I imagine composting's pretty fun for kids too. Do you feel like you get a lot of stories like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think kids have an easier time like getting their head around the idea than adults even sometimes, right? They're kind of like they kind of grasp it intuitively, right? And they kind of kids like adults like, oh, I've got to separate these things, but kids kind of like sorting things into different like categories and boxes, right? And kids kind of they're super into like the worms or like the other stuff, right? And so I do think that there's there's a natural curiosity that children have. I mean, I've got 3 kids of my own, and like so I get to kind of like see these experiments happening in real time, right? There's just a natural curiosity about how and why the world works, which makes them more open to these kind of things. And I think as adults we lose often. We're just set that the world is how it is and our routines are what they are, and we're so busy that we don't have time to kind of like have that joy and that wonder, and so that makes us more closed off to those experiences. And it's one of my favorite parts about being a parent is kind of like watching them learn about the world, right? And so I think to your point, like with your kids and making that meal together, and like I'm sure like they like that's part of the reason the beet tastes good is because they went on this whole journey with it.
They helped to make it.
Right. It didn't just get like come out of a bag and put in the microwave and like or a can and now it's on your plate, right?
And I'm like, we may not have beets this year. Sometimes the leaves have holes in them, and it's like, why do they have holes in them? I think that relating it back to like the larger, critique of the system too. Like there is something that is in our current economy. It's like a lot about like we actually most companies are trying to actually hide the backstory because this is this piece of clothing was made in a sweatshop in Indonesia or whatever it is, or like this, this produce was grown in like, in an exploited like land that's, a rainforest that's been cut down by people who weren't paid. So we try not to talk about that and like, banana. And so like, and I think that like, that is, it's like harmful, like, sorry, Tim likes bananas. Because so anyways, I think that like gets people upset, or like so then like people are just like, where did my trash go? And like what happens like they like both don't want to think about the process and they're blind to it, whereas kids are like actually interested in like hearing about it, and that's something that we can do. That's really a natural part of our business, is that the process is the product, and so leaning into that.
I'm going to shift gears from the joy and wonder of being a child to the bureaucracy and red tape of working with city government.
That's a good transition.
Nice sharp turn. But one of the frequent complaints about Philly is that it's not hospitable to small businesses. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but between taxes and red tape, have you found that to be your experience? And then how have you navigated some of those things to establish your businesses here?
I think that there are, like, some of the city taxes are interesting because I get it. Like this, as a city, I mean, as a Philadelphia resident, I'm like, yeah, these corporations, like, you're coming in here, you're doing business in Philly, like, you're taking advantage of what we have here in this city and what we built and maintain, and you're benefiting from that. Like, you should pay your fair share, For a small business, I think that and it's like probably a lot of things in government where it's like, this is going to help out, this is going to help, like, this is going to be good for the common, for everybody, and good for the common person or whatever. But then but then it's the big companies that are getting all of the tax breaks, and it's the little companies that are paying, these like Baird and NPT taxes, where like I've had years where I've lost money. I've lost $100,000 and I owe the city $10,000. And we're building a local food system, making like we run a neighborhood farmers market, like delivering food to seniors. You know what I mean? Like it's like, and I'm like, I just have to imagine that like probably some of the corporations aren't paying these same taxes, and like why? I would love to see the city have some exemptions on some of the if what you were doing was adding value to the city, I'd love the city to say like, hey, we want these businesses to exist here. These are an important part of our ecosystem. You are making the city a better place, and we're going to give you some tax exemptions on the Baird and NPT tax, which are taxes that basically they're not things that you pay if you're in the suburbs. And for us, it's really important to be in Philly. So we're in Philly, and we're that's an important part of our ethos and why we exist. But yeah.
I mean, it's a little, I've only ever had a business in Philly, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit like I don't have a comparison point of like, oh, if I was only in wherever, it would be so much easier and there would be so much bureaucracy. I mean, some of my experience with people who do businesses in other places, that like everyone complains about their taxes, everyone complains about their bureaucracy, right? So like I think there is an inherent nature of that in the tension between businesses that are trying to like do things and move quickly, and government that is trying to make sure things are done in the right way and that their resources are kind of like taxed in a fair way that benefits the broader community. Is Philly worse than other places? I don't have a good answer.
Well, I mean, you have a huge contract with, or like rec departments, and like you have a very close relationship with the city.
Yeah, so I mean, we do a bunch of work with the city. Like we work with the Department of Recreation, we work with the Department of Prisons, and there's a lot of other interactions with city government. I think those things move slowly and they take time, right? But that's part of the nature of kind of the beast, and I think we don't rely on those things exclusively for our business success. And I think if we did, it'd be really challenging because they take time, it takes resources. If you are on a pay for service contract, like the pay can be slow sometimes, right? So there are these challenges with working there. They may want more kind of like attention for what they're doing compared to like a commercial customer. But there are benefits there, right? There are trade-offs there in terms of like, what we do with Parks and Rec. We're providing, collections from all of the recreation centers and playgrounds throughout the city for the food waste from their after-school programs. And we are also doing stuff now, like where we did composting for the Broad Street Run this year, right? And so we're working with some of their older adult centers now. And right, we're doing all of that as a barter in exchange for use of a piece of city-owned property, which houses kind of like our main warehouse operations and also where we run a permanent composting facility, right? And so like that's also a big benefit, right? So we kind of there's a balance here in terms of like what we get and what we do. And I think we're in a good position where we're big enough that we can take advantage and deal with some of the headaches of the bureaucracy, which do for sure exist, but we're small enough that the benefits that they have are still valuable for us, right? And so it's like everything in life, there are trade-offs there, right? Like, and sometimes you're banging your head and you're like, why are we having a meeting about this, right? Like this is an hour meeting that could have been in like an email. And at the same time, like there's also like the benefits of then like being at all those rec centers and the city doing, right? We talked about education, right? So part of that program that we're doing all the composting, but the city is providing education out at those after school programs to those young people, to those staff, exposing them to the idea of composting. And we help them craft it and we help them do some of the early ones, but now they're continuing to do that work, right? So again, it's a slow build, it takes time, right? And I think that's kind of been our experience, right? Like we're not an overnight success story. We're a 16 years of figuring it out story, right? And continuing to figure it out. And I think that is, the work that we do with the Department of Prisons, like that relationship started in 2013. We didn't actually do anything officially with them until 2021, right? So like these things take a lot of time, and you can't, in my experience, like if your business is based on that, you're opening up a huge kind of like risk potential there. But it can be if you're prepared and you have the right staffing and the right size, it can be a big benefit to you. So it's all kind of part of the deal, I guess.
And it is cool that the city of Philly, like when they bid out contracts and things like that, there's a lot of emphasis placed on bidding to businesses that are based here in Philly. Like, and I think that when that Philly, and again, I've never done business anywhere else, so I don't know what it's like, but like we did a program with the Division of Public Health, and it's like 30 weeks of delivering boxes to expecting parents. And it's all about eating healthy during pregnancy. And it's like the fact that they're willing to go with Philly Foodworks for something like that, they didn't have to. Like they came to us. That was something important to them, was to support a local business doing it. So I think that that's an area where the city is like can be really supportive of businesses.
Cool. So obviously both of your organizations are based in Philly. Also, they both involve picking up and delivering items, packaging, et cetera, to people in the city. How do you handle the logistics of that?
It's part of what has made us successful is being able to handle those logistics, right? And so that's having delivery and pickup systems that are kind of tailored to work in the urban environment. Again, it goes back to we're very focused on making composting simple in Philadelphia, right? So we have 40% of our collections are done via electric bicycle, right? So in the super dense neighborhoods with the super small streets, we're not trying to drive some giant truck down it. The kind of vehicles that we use and the routing softwares that we use are focused on these smaller vehicles, these smaller trucks, and kind of building these operations around that and being able to do that. Believe it or not, there are compost companies like us all over the country, and most of them are always like blown away by the density of our customer base and how much we can do in a period of time because of that density. So it's actually having that dense thing, while it took some figuring out, like is an advantage to us. And on the commercial side, the fact that we're able to do these things that like your traditional waste companies might not be able to do is oftentimes why people go with us. We do a lot of work with kind of like brewers and microbreweries, and they have all this spent grain that's really heavy, and then you might need to get it from this weird like loading dock situation. And there are some of them who frankly said like they're not in it because they believe in composting. They're in it because we're the only people who said we would pick it up. Like who could figure out how to pick it up, right? So there is also like that's an advantage to us of just being a very Philadelphia-centric, Philadelphia-focused local company who understands how the local marketplace works and has built our systems around it.
We have a lot of different challenges than compost.
Yeah.
Because compost, like no one's worried about stealing. Someone stealing your compost bucket.
They are. You'd be surprised at how many compost buckets get stolen.
Just don't put it past Philly. We also are like, we don't want to deliver when people aren't there or aren't going to be getting their box like soon-ish. And that means one thing that we've been doing, we did this recently where now people can select like different delivery windows, and that's been really important. And also like the updates, like you get a text message and then it's like, oh, your driver's going to be here at 3:20, and then you can like see like when they're going to arrive, and those are things that have been really important for us. But I think that's something that's also important, and both of our companies do this, is that like all of the people who do deliveries at both of our companies are employees. And like, for our drivers, like we have a team of 6 drivers. We have delivery drivers where it's like, oh, Elaine always bakes a loaf of bread for James every week. Like there's a relationship that gets built there, kind of going back to the customer service thing. Like people are hungry for this like relationship. And I think that actually ends up helping us like on a logistics side. And so I think that's an interesting way in which like actually a relationship business that cares about people is actually, it supports it from a delivery logistics side too.
Sort of final question for you on this front is, in what ways do you provide employment opportunities or training to local residents or underrepresented groups in the city?
Pretty much everybody who works at Philly Foodworks lives in Philly. I'm like thinking about everybody now. I think everybody who works at Philly Foodworks lives in the city. So definitely lots of opportunities for local residents. A lot of people who come to Philly Foodworks who work there are all coming from friend referrals. Or like, so it's like we have an open spot on the line, and it's like 3 people are like, oh, I know someone who's like who'd be interested. We've had people from like the restaurant industry. Like after the pandemic, we had a lot of people who were out of jobs from the restaurants, and so like people who came, and so it'd be like the whole kitchen, from like a restaurant would be like something that work in the pack line. So it's like people kind of come from weird places along this journey, and then like once you're there, like it's a community of people who you care about, who care about you, and like people don't really leave.
Almost no one who starts at Bennett Compost comes in and is like a compost enthusiast, right? And I think that, and we have hired people in the past who have been compost enthusiasts, and the reality of what the work is not necessarily with the kind of like idea of being a composter that they have in their mind, right? And so
it's tough work.
I used to.
I've seen it, man.
It's a little bit different now. I used to have this kind of standard joke when I would tell people like, oh, I have a compost business. And they'd like, that's so cool. And I'm like, yeah, it's great. I spend half my day knee deep in garbage and the other half knee deep in paperwork. You should come try it, right? But I do think that like what we do is that we have, and we're trying to like find ways to formalize this a little bit more. You know, we take that and we train people in terms of what they need to do. And so we can take someone who doesn't have a lot of background in what we're doing, but has a desire for a job that's going to pay them a fair wage and have benefits, and that will be pretty, flexible within the constraints of what a full-time job can be. And they stick with it over time. And like Dylan, we get almost all our hires are referrals from somebody who already works here, right? Like that's the first place we go when we have an opening. And that's because the people who work there feel like this is a good job, right? And so, we have a number of people who have been formerly incarcerated at some point in their life, but that hasn't really happened because we've gone out and targeted, like, we're going to do a lot of this kind of hiring. It happened because we were already doing some work with the Philadelphia prisons. The woman, Laura Cassidy, who runs all their sustainability stuff, made a referral for an individual who was working there, and she's like, he's getting released. He's smart, he's hardworking, he just needs someone to look past the choices he's made and give him a chance. And we did that, and he's great, and we're very lucky to have him, but he's also brought us this whole network of people that we might not otherwise be connected to, right? There are a lot of programs out there, but sometimes you need kind of a warm connection to start these kind of relationships to groups that you may not be connected to in your own way when you're a small business, right? We also kind of just take kind of on a rolling basis people who are interested in having a job from us, and then when we have an opening, we'll reach out to them. And most of the time it works, and some of the time it doesn't, and that's like some of the challenges of being a small business. Maybe there's a point, but you can't ever be above getting in on the line and packing some boxes, or getting in the vehicle, whether it's a truck or a bike, and going to do some pickups, because like at the end of the day, like that's what your people are paying you for. And that's what I kind of remind people all the time, is like the most important people are the people who are doing the actual work. All the rest of us are what's called overhead. Right? Like the people who are doing the work is what is creating the value. That's what's creating the value. We're overhead.
One thing that we've gotten really into is like cross-departmental training. And so like now pretty much everybody at Philly Foodworks is trained in at least one other department. Some people are trained in like 4 other departments. And like that's been the way that we've been able to we're able to like scale our work with like the volume, because it's like we deliver 3 days a week, and so it's like, we got a big week, like people from the pack line are coming in to help with pre-packing, or like people from the pre-pack team are helping with the cooler. And so I think that's been like an interesting way that we've had to adapt the business model. And then also it like is why we invest in training people, because people are the most important part. And so there's like something there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you spoke to connections a little bit, and just one other thing that I wanted to hit on is I know you use some of your warehouse space to also help local producers get their business up and running. Could you speak a little bit to kind of how you came to do that, and who you've helped bolster?
Well, Tim and I, or I guess we didn't meet, we met at Temple a long time ago. That was true. We like kind of re-met as roommates at the Share Food program under the late and great Steve Anna Wynn. She wanted the space to be used to its full extent. She liked having people in there at different times of night and like different times in the day, and using all this different space. And I think it was like this idea that like the more people in here, the more people are looking out for each other, the more I'm able to pay my mortgage, and that like, many hands make light work. And it wasn't like the big like philosophy, like it wasn't like something that she preached, but it was like, as you like, when you paid attention, you're just like, you have everybody under the sun here. And so we've been doing that because like that's also going back to the Foodworks part and trying to build this utility. We want to be the system of, system network infrastructure of local food. And so like, I think there's like maybe 10 different people who are renting space with us right now. So it's like everything from like Aji's Tomatoes Lanza, who's got 3 pallets in the freezer, and they come in on Mondays and put stickers on the outgoing like Lanza, which is this wonderful coastal Indian cuisine. Then there's like the Philadelphia Bee Guild started processing honey in our loading dock area, which like we got approved for. Like the state came out and did the inspection. Hot sauce, pickle people, someone who runs a farmer's market, like woodworker. Just like so many different people, and it's great. It's like a really beautiful thing because like there just becomes this like, again, you have people there at different times, people are looking out for one another. I mean, we have cameras and stuff in the building, but like there's a lot of trust that happens. Like no one messes with anybody's stuff. Like people could just go and, people are very respectful of each other's space. And I think it's like a testament to like the whole thing about like city design and like the more mixed uses you can have for a space, like the safer that community is, the stronger that community is, the like more resilient it is. And so it's like, it both is like on this like mission level, whatever, but also like, yeah, there's more people help covering the mortgage. And so that's,
I also think it doesn't take anything away from any of the hard work that Dylan has done or that I've done to recognize that in addition to all that hard work and smarts, like we were very lucky to have a lot of good people who gave us those opportunities when we were starting out.
Yeah.
And so they kind of have built into us in the way that we approach a business, and that like, you know, you got a hand, you give someone else a hand, you give the next person a hand, right? It's kind of built into the way that your business grew up, right? And so it's how you want to help the next generation of businesses like get to where you are and hopefully like succeed it, right? I mean, I think one of the things that Steve Anna was so proud of was like how well Dylan's business did, right? Like even after like she had moved on from Share and he had moved on from the Share building, like to see his success, right? Like was something that she was proud of. And I know that like for us, like people to see our, like what we have become, like there are people who helped us along the way that's a point of pride for them, right? And so like the hope is that like we can be that person for someone else. At least I assume for Dylan, I know that for myself.
yeah, she let me live there.
I know. I remember. I was like, "You're living here." So to wrap up, we have some Philly favorites to ask you.
Wanted to ask you a couple questions about some of your favorites around the city and Philly.
Yeah.
So I guess just to kick us off, what's one thing that non-Philly people should know about Philly?
Don't come here. No, I'm kidding. I was at the Mann Center. The Mann Center is amazing. The Mann Center is like that. I'm gonna every summer we're gonna go to a summer concert. It's one really quick. It's like a beautiful Philly experience because like you go there to park. Like there's no parking lot, right? Like it's all just parking in the park. Which Fairmount Park's the biggest urban park in the entire country. So like right there is like who knew that? Who knew that Philly had the biggest urban park in the entire country? And then you're parking it. There's no parking attendants. There's no anybody telling anybody. But you have 10,000 people who are all attending this concert who are all respectfully making sure people are getting out looking. Did I block that person in? No, and like I think that there's an anti-authoritarian thing in Philly that I really appreciate, and the man is like that. And you go, man, you can sit anywhere you want. I mean, and it's just it's a beautiful space, and I think that the Mann Center is like a really wonderful experience.
I mean, I think the one this is maybe a little bit cliche, but that like there's a warmth to the people here, right? And it's, Philly has this reputation, it's an East Coast city and everyone's like tough and get out of my face and blah, 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 and tell you how it is. But it all comes from a place of caring. And if you don't get caught up in the outside part of that, there's just such a community of people who care and want to make things better and want to help, and just even if they don't care about the things you care about, they care deeply, right? And so I do think that that's a reputation that Philly gets is that I think is underappreciated, right? And so I do think that's kind of one thing that non-Philly people should know, just kind of about the people who live in, the people who are born here and the people who choose to live here. I think kind of both embody that.
You sort of hit on this already, but your favorite thing about living in Philly, I guess beyond the warmth and the culture.
No, I mean, I think there is some amazing food. And there's all these interesting things that happen in the individual neighborhoods. All these neighborhood level celebration of very different things that can be really cool to explore. I live in Mount Airy now, and we're right by the Wissahickon, and the Wissahickon is a fantastic place that I take when people are out of town. I love to take them into the Wissahickon and just go walk around. It's right, you can be 5 minutes from being in the city and then going right into the kind of pristine woods. It's just, yeah, I think those are some of my favorite things.
I also live in Mount Airy and love the Wissahickon. Yeah, I love bike riding in Philly. I think Philly is a great city to bike in, and is also just a great way to experience the city. Yeah, the city of neighborhoods is real, and I think that it's cool to go to different neighborhoods and and there be different culture and different people always have something to say about a different neighborhood, and that's interesting.
I also want to add, I know it gets a lot of flack, but I think that the fact that there is public transportation here, and the public transportation that it works. It may not work the way we want to, and there may be a lot of changes, and I know it's been in the news recently, but I was just having a conversation yesterday, and this was someone who was making a decision on anywhere they could live in the United States. They were from Tennessee originally, and they were living in France, and they were looking at where they could live. And they chose Philly, and part of it was because Philly was one of the few cities that had a really robust public transportation network. And so the idea of not having to have a car, like I didn't own a vehicle until I started Bennett Compost, right? And so like this idea that there are all these, like whether it's biking, whether it's public transportation, whether it's walking, like there are all these things that we take for granted and we kind of, for lack of a term, like shit on because like it's not where we want it to be or where we think it should be, right? We have these.
Oh, and that's part of being in Philly is like there's an endearing. We can talk about Philly. You can't talk about Philly. You know what I mean?
The story of Gritty always comes to mind for me. Everyone was like, what is this? But then as soon as someone outside of Philly started giving Gritty a hard time, can't talk about Gritty.
Yeah, right.
We rallied around him. A little bit of a pivot, but where's your favorite cheesesteak in Philly? Always a hot button topic.
D'Alessandro's.
Okay.
See, I get why I would go with Chubby's, which is actually right across the street from D'Alessandro's.
That's because he doesn't like waiting in a line.
They also have a bar in there and a bathroom. Two things that I appreciate: beer and a bathroom.
You just go eat them at the football field.
But I think that's also some of it's about like where you live, right? So I don't think that was the case until I lived in Mount Airy, and that those places were closer. But a real Philadelphia person would tell you that the best cheesesteak is probably guaranteed is within like half a mile from their house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many good options.
I mean, I was amazed when I moved to Philly, and it was like you go to any corner store and get a cheesesteak for $3.50. I was like, what? And it's like fresh baked. The bread, like someone told me that, like the reason why the cheesesteaks are all so good is because of the bread. Like the bread is fresh every day. The city eats so much hoagie rolls that like there's just every corner store has fresh bread every day. And yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Like it really is a fuel of the proletariat.
City powered on hoagies. Yeah. And then what's your favorite non-cheesesteak place to eat?
I really like in Riva.
Also local for you.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's also really funny, right? Because in Riva is like, I actually don't know what it means. Something about the river, on the shore, on the river, something like that. And it's like, but then like there you are, like in this Google, and there's like people catching like just mud catfish, and like Roosevelt Boulevard's going right over you. But you're at this like really high quality Italian restaurant that's like, but not pretentious. And it's great. Everything about in Riva is great. They have a great upstairs, great for kids, great for drinks. Great pizza, good octopus.
Yeah, I think there's so many kind of good places to eat, right? Like everything from like, where we are located now. There's a whole like which people wouldn't think of in we're in Longcrest, like in Lower Northeast, and there's a whole like plaza full of like Vietnamese restaurants, right? That you can get banh mi's and you can get pho and you can get all this kind of like delicious food. And then when I lived in South Philly, there's like all this like great Mexican and great, again, also like Southeast Asian stuff. And so for me, like, I don't know whether I have like a one. I also like now, like a lot of my like culinary stuff is like, where's a place that I could take my kids and I won't destroy everyone else's like mood for the day as someone who's got like 3 kids who are 8, 6, and 6, right? And so a place where the kids can hang out is like important for me now, but there are just so, this is a little bit of a punt, but there's so many good places that like, whether you want Italian food or whether you want Mexican or whether you want Indonesian or whether you want Vietnamese or whether just like going to Chinatown is great, right? There's like a lot of really good food there. And so, I think that the total non-answer answer is that like it really depends on like what you're in the mood for. Like,
so what's your favorite? If you had to pick one, what's your favorite? What would you pick?
I don't think I could.
You got a banh mi spot we should know about?
I mean, any one. There's like 4 of them that are like 5 minutes from our thing. We literally will rotate through them at work. I mean, I'll do everything. Like we'll go to. There's a place. I think it's called like Porky's. That is like on the corner of like where like Rising Sun. The Porky's on the Point. Like it's on the corner of like Rising Sun and 6th Street, like in North Philly, and they've got like fantastic empanadas, right? Like so. I mean, there's just like finding all these kind of like. I'm a big fan of finding these like hole in the wall places, and I just like that's kind of like where I love to go, and also I can't tell you where they are because then everyone will go there. And then they won't
Porky's, you heard it here.
There's going to be a line next time.
There's already a line.
A lot of higher ed marketers.
but I do think that like so I'm going to totally punt on that and just say whatever you're in the mood for, like find the best neighborhood place you can go to, whether it's like even just like a neighborhood like bar, right? Mm-hmm. I mean like. When I used to love going to like Royal Tavern in South Philly, right? Yeah. You'd love going to like, there's just so many good places.
The hot dogs at the L Bar. It's a good hot dog.
I haven't had one of those in years.
I don't think anyone's going to the L Bar for the hot dog.
It's the 3-day grease on the roller that really gives it the je ne sais quoi.
So Jill and Tim, thank you for joining us today. It's been a great conversation, and we just both really appreciate the time that you took to talk to us about your businesses, about marketing, about your best spots in Philly to eat, and everything else we covered today. So thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thoughtful questions and some laughs and good times.
Yeah, I feel like we've entered a new world.
We'll see you at Porky's.
There you go.
See you at Porky's.